Welcome to Your Future in Sales and Marketing, a podcast that helps you make great career decisions to get the most out of your career journey. We'll introduce you to the AXR network of established senior leaders and a handpicked group of future aspiring leaders who have it all in front of them. You'll learn what it's like in the top job and how to get there. Your hosts from AXR's specialist sales and marketing recruitment team will also land bonus episodes for you on how to work with recruiters, write a resume, and smash an interview, as well as our very popular market updates. It's the podcast that has it all. You can't get this career advice anywhere else.
Welcome everyone to Your Future in Sales and Marketing, Australia's leading career podcast. Today, I'm joined by a high-profile Aussie business leader, Mark Powell, Chief Customer Officer of Inghams, one of Australia's oldest and largest FMCGs, and a business that has gone through a lot of change over the past 10 years. I'm looking forward to exploring Mark's journey to his role at Inghams today, as well as what the future holds for him and this great Aussie business. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much, Mike. Glad to be here, and hello to all your listeners.
Excellent. Now we're going to really get into your journey, and there's lots to explore within that. Before we do, just a bit about your backstory. Icebreaker first. What's the best holiday you've ever had?
I'm about to do it. So I'm heading to Scandinavia in about 2 weeks' time. So, but I did do, going back some time, I did take about 10 months off and backpacked all around the USA and Europe as well. And that was the time of my life. I'd only been working for 4 years and decided to pack up and got a job in the UK, and then literally took the 10 months off in between. And it was a time that I'll never forget. And it's right up there in terms of most enjoyable time of my life.
That is remarkably similar. I was 4 years into my career as a marketer, as a brand manager who was frustratingly not getting promoted to a senior brand manager. So I went off backpacking as well for a year. And I've always thought, I want to do that again, but with more money.
Yes. Well, back then it was amazing because they let us cash in our super. So I was able to cash in, I had 20 grand in my super. You could cash that out at that time. And that's what helped me fund the trip when I went away.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, enjoy Scandinavia. We were talking about that offline, and I know our producer Paddy wants to ask you some questions on that as well. So excellent. So where are you from? Tell us a little about your early life, where you grew up, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm a Taswegian, so I actually grew up down there in Hobart, or as some people call it, Slowbart. But it was a great place to grow up. I'm one of 7 kids. As you'd imagine, mum and dad, big Catholics. They actually moved us down there. We were sort of half of us were born in Melbourne, the other half in Tassie. And dad decided to move down there and set up a building business. And he told mum it would only be 5 years because mum's actually from Sydney and loves the warm weather. Anyway, 20 years later, they decided to, after we'd all gone through school and university, they decided to move up to Ballina. And I was down there for all of my schooling, all of my university, and then took a job up in Sydney as soon as I finished university, and then I've spent most of my time in Sydney, been in a few of the other states, and in the UK as well, worked there.
Brilliant. Fantastic. Okay, well, it's interesting talking about your background, because when we were chatting ahead of this pod and doing our prep, Mark, one of the things that came up was there's a lot of accountants in your family. And mine is the same. I'm the only non-accountant in my family. And here we are on the Sales and Marketing Careers podcast. How did that happen? So, you worked for as a CA for what, 6-8 years or so. Talk about, what got you into being an accountant, and, what was it like being a CA?
Yeah, it was an interesting one because when I finished school, you didn't really know what you wanted to do. And Dad being a builder, so like a tradie, all the tradies wanted their kids to go to university because they were like, okay, don't become a tradie, go to university. That's a better life. And of course, he was saying to me, you should go and do commerce. And of course, your dad says that, you try and do the opposite. And so actually I wanted to join a place called Drysdale House, which was a hospitality college. And I thought that would be great. I like the hospitality side of things. But when I went and did the interview there was 2 things that put me off a little bit. One was you had to wear a tie and jacket every day. And the second one was when I said to them, what further education would you do after the 2 years? They said, you should do a commerce degree. So I went, oh, bugger it. I'll just go and do the commerce degree. So I sort of came home and said, Dad, guess what? I'll do the commerce degree. So did that. And I always loved business and economics and commerce, and did that. And then at the end of that was back at the time where all the accounting firms would come to the university and interview everyone and try and recruit people. When it came to demand and supply, there was a lot more demand than supply. So it was quite easy sort of getting a role and getting up to Sydney. I think I got offered 4 jobs or 5 jobs from sort of 5 interviews. And I'm not blowing up my tires there, but I think everyone did because of that demand and supply challenge. And I thought I'd come up and do that, and started off in the audit world, which I lasted about 2 years there. That was a pretty mundane job, but the experience you got going out to all of these different companies and doing the audit in all the companies, I look back on that and go, I think that laid some really good foundations for going into new environments and having to understand them. And then also the GFC happened around that time. So the Price Waterhouse who I was working for, who were a very reputable firm back then, had a few problems since, they basically were setting up an insolvency department because there was a lot of insolvency work. So I got recruited. One of my flatmates was working at Arthur Andersen, and he seemed to be having a lot of fun with insolvency. It wasn't as strict as what the auditing was. And so I jumped into that for a couple of years and loved all that sort of work. So that sort of got me started. Had that nearly a year off, and then worked at Price Waterhouse in the UK as well, in insolvency as well. And then by the time I got back to Australia with Price Waterhouse, the insolvency work had dried up a bit. So I was more into a management consulting sort of area there for a year or 2.
Great. It's funny how the brands evolve. My brother worked for Arthur Andersen, which was back then was quite a cool company to work for. Gosh, did it fall apart? PwC have got problems.
Yeah. Well, back in the day, then Arthur Andersen was always seen as the brashy Lamborghini type of firm, and Price Waterhouse was seen as the old Rolls Royce. It was more steady as you go, and that was how they were seen in the marketplace at the time. So it's interesting how they've all evolved.
I know. So anyway, you got to travel with it as well, which was great. And I think for those of most in this podcast, they're more sales and marketing orientated, but it's amazing how many people do build in that accountancy background early on in career, because you get such variety of work and exposure to different organizations. It's kind of actually had the reason I moved from marketing into recruitment. I wanted just to know about more companies, as opposed to just sitting in one company and knowing all about that one business. So it's you get a lot from it. But so you did move out of accountancy, or you moved from PwC to CCA. Actually, let's just talk about that. So interesting move. Explain your thinking behind it.
Yeah, well, when I came back from the UK, I really enjoyed working at Price Waterhouse. Price Waterhouse were great at giving you the career path and also the training, because at the end of the day, their only assets they've got are the human assets, are the people that are there. So they invest a lot in that. You can sort of know how your REM's going to develop and move and all the rest of it. But when I got back, I remember I'd be charged out on the hour for like $350 an hour. And I'm thinking, I'm not worth that. Like this is not, and I wasn't really enjoying being a consultant. I was actually wanted to really get involved in things. So lucky enough, a role came up in, CCA. And actually the first role I went for there was a finance role, and I didn't get it. And I thought, geez, that's pretty bad. I didn't think it was, I thought I was a fair chance at getting that role. And they rang me back up and said, we don't want to offer you that role, but we've got another role that's a bit more commercial, which we think will suit you. And I was like, oh, thank God for that. So I went into this sort of commercial role, which I was supporting all of the national sales team, the national account team. And I did that for a couple of years and really enjoyed that with CCA. CCA had a lot of resource, again, a lot of really smart people there, really good systems. And just that was a really good transition from Price Waterhouse into CCA. And we had really good leaders in there as well at the time. So I really enjoyed that start in there in the commercial area.
Did you have a perception of sales people before you got to know them?
I did. And I used to observe them a lot because I was sitting on the same floor with them in the workstations. And, the guy that was running that whole national account team, Peter Kelly, surprisingly enough, him and I both liked AFL footy. So we'd kick the footy around the office a bit. And so I got to know him quite a bit. And then he basically came to me and said, would you like to do a sales role? But I'm only going to offer you this role if you can help coach everyone up on financial skills. And at the time, the salespeople weren't that commercial. And although we had really good reporting systems and profitability by SKU and all sorts of things, they weren't really using it. So that was the sort of the deal and that's how I got myself into sales. And of course, I'd be watching all these people in sales going to these great events and customer entertainment and all of that. I'm thinking, I think this is the area I need to get into. So, and it was lucky enough that Peter sort of approached me, and then I sort of went from there. And it was just lucky that was a skill set that they wanted to bring into the sales environment at the time.
Yeah, but it wasn't necessarily. Or did you think at the time this could be another path for me completely? Or was it just, hey, I'm going to try this, see what it's like?
Yeah, it was more probably just try it and see what it's like, because I wasn't really sure. I sort of thought I would stay in that commercial space. CCA had employed a lot of MBA graduates as well, and they were doing a lot of exciting things. And also the company was expanding overseas, and I think they ended up with like 16 countries. They were the bottler in 16 countries in Europe. So I was thinking that was where I'd sort of head to.
It was interesting that, you were brought in to upskill, commercial acumen, because you look at, as a modern sales recruiter now, I look at modern salespeople and I see them as pretty smart analytically with good commercial acumen. It's one of the first things we look at. Do you think it's been a big change over the years, or is it just a case of unlocking it within CCA?
I think it's been a big change over the years, I think. Yeah. I think it's so important now for salespeople. It's really the fundamentals of all areas as well to understand the commercial and the numbers. So, I think that's, I always say that for most people in a business, I really encourage them to have 3 or 4 functional skills, and to keep looking for those horizontal moves. What do they call it sometimes? Horizontal growth.
Yeah.
But I think that especially with flat structures in businesses now, but I think if you can keep getting yourself well-rounded in the different areas, and you can often do that within an existing business as well. Leaders will take a punt on you in the existing business, and then that allows you to go out into other areas with a different skill set.
Yeah. And let's explore how that happened for you, because your career in sales did progress really well at CCA, and you then made a big move to Adelaide, to leave CCA, to run the West End Brewery, like a South Australian institution at the time. Part of Line, how did that move and come about, and why did you do that?
Yeah, well, back then I'd spent time with the customer team with CCA, and then I asked to go out and run one of the field teams. So I'd never carried the bag in sales. So I always knew that I wanted to get as close as I could to the teams that were doing that so I could understand that. And the way I learned was being more involved in and seeing it happen and working with the team. And I really enjoyed that. And then I really wanted a move interstate. We'd been living in Sydney for quite a while. My wife and I, we had 2 young kids, and I was just keen to get out and see how the operations work. And I CCA, to be honest, were being a bit slow about that move for me. And some ex-CCA, our ex-managing director, ex-sales director had gone to Lion. And so they'd reached out to me going, look, we've got this opportunity for you down in SA. Would you like to go? And I was like, oh, absolutely. Yeah, I really want that. Ticks that box. But it was a bit like, I was quite worried at the time. And I think now in hindsight, I shouldn't have been worried at all. But I was thinking, wow, I'm going to go into a new industry, beer. I'm going into a new state. So it's a new bunch of customers down there as well. Got to move the whole family. And I thought, oh shit, can I do this? Will it be possible? And I sort of look back at it, and there's so many similarities between CCA and Lion in terms of branded, package, customer base, promotional activity, all of those sort of things. But I wasn't thinking about the moment. I think it was quite a big move. But it was the best thing I did as well, because I joined a company that was a real culture-based company and behavior-based company. And also when I got there, I had to really slow up and stop and listen to, and I must say probably that age, I was, after sort of 8 years in CCA, I was probably a bit cocky at how good I thought I was. And I'd done an MBA, and I thought I've got to be fast-tracked. And so it did make me stop and start listening and start again when I got to Lion. And I think it was a really good change for me as well, because Lion did have a different set of behaviours than what CCA. CCA was more a competitive environment, where Lion was more constructive. So looking back on it, it was a really good move. Not that I knew that at the start, though.
Mm. Well, I think like a lot of big moves, often the fear factor stops people putting themselves out there. And it's funny because I guess people on the outside might have looked at you and thought, well, here's this guy doing really well. Of course he'll take it. But you still have those doubts, don't you?
Oh, yeah.
And can I do this? Can I do it? What's it going to be like? But clearly it went well. You thrived in it, Mark. And the adventure continued, because after that, you then moved again, but north to Queensland to take on Forex.
Yeah, well, at the time, my boss, Jeremy Lowe, was saying, right, we're going to get you back to Sydney now, back to head office and back into a national role. And I was like, no, that's not the deal. Well, the deal was, and actually I'd bought a place in Adelaide as well. I thought I was staying for like 4 or 5 years. And I told all the customers I was staying, because they all said, you'll only be here for a couple of years and then you leave. And I was going, no, I've bought a place. I'm going to stay. I really want to enjoy my time down here. So, but after 2 years, an opportunity came up in Queensland. Queensland was obviously a lot bigger business for Lion. They used to say if Queensland sneezes, the whole company catches a cold. And so they said, right, are you moving? And it was strange at the time, because my wife was about 36 weeks pregnant, and I came home and said, guess what, we're moving up to Brisbane in a couple of weeks' time. She's like, great, okay, I need to find a hospital and a house and all sorts of things. And so off we went and did that. And again, they had a lot of similarities between SA and Queensland in terms of the role the brewery played in the community and how big and iconic it was. And we used to have, Lion actually had managing directors in each of the states and each of the breweries as well. So it was actually a decentralized model, which had all been centralized by the time I'd got there. But still, the customers all thought you were still boss of the brewery. And nice title to have. Wasn't really, but it was I loved it up there, because the brewery meant so much to so many consumers and so many customers up there as well. And so it was a great experience. And I stayed there for 2 years before having to move back down to Sydney, which I always knew was going to be on the cards. But I tried to hold as long as I could in the state-based roles, because, again, I really wanted to understand the grassroots of the business and how it all worked. And so when I was thinking and making decisions in the head office, I could understand the implications of those.
Such iconic brands and breweries to be running as well. Albeit, as you say, the business was centralizing away from that decentralized model, but you were still the custodian of that brand in Queenslanders' eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was the volume we did up there. I remember the first got up there, we had a heat wave that came in the summer, and with actually the brewery ran out of beer, and it was all over the news. And I had to do some funny little plugs for the radio and the news about the brewery with no beer. We had one pallet left, I think, at the end of it, and we had bottle shops running to other bottle shops to get it, and so. It made a lot of news, and thankfully we didn't run out of beer that rest of the time I was there. But I mean, they used to do that back in the day. They'd pretend there was a strike on so they could pick up sales as well. So, but this was a genuine run out of beer.
Oh, trade secrets.
Yes.
You mentioned, Mark, obviously Lion was decentralized. It was becoming more of a centralized business, and you then came back to Sydney, as you knew you probably eventually would. That was on having done your kind of world tour of Australia, and to take national leadership of the sales function, which is a big role in a business that was going through a lot of change. Just talk through, how do you kind of establish what was that a new role? What was being created for you at the time?
No, it had been my previous boss, Jeremy Lowe's, had been doing that role beforehand.
Right.
And I must say, when I'd gone to SA and Queensland, I always used to look at that role and say, oh my God, I wouldn't want that role.
Really?
Too much stress.
Yeah.
He was a pretty frantic operator. he was. I still love working for him because you knew exactly where you stood with him. But he was quite hard and quite disciplined. But I did like that. But I used to look at that role, going, I couldn't do that. That's just the breadth of this and the size of this. I couldn't do it. But after spending time in SA and Queensland, and then I thought, actually, I might have some confidence. And when I got there to start with, that role actually got split into 3. So it was an easier transition for me. And so I basically looked after all of the field team. And that was a sizable team. There was probably we had about sort of 350 out in the field in all of the states. And so that's where I sort of started. And then over time, we went from 3 sales directors to 2 to 1. And then I ended up being that 1 and doing that role for quite a while. And so it was that made the transition to the single sales director a little bit easier.
It's almost like the perfect career planning, wasn't it?
Yes.
It's like, we'll give you a third of it, then we'll build up slowly so you have the whole thing. Yeah,
That's right. Would have been nice if they tripled the salary as well, but anyway.
Oh, they didn't?
No.
It's funny that never happens, is it?
Never.
What are the big milestones you look back on in that period? Because you were in, I guess, in various iterations, but moving up to the big role in that sales function, centralized sales function, 12, 13 years at Lion. Kind of take us through the stages of what you managed to achieve over that period.
Yeah, I mean, that it's a real brand-led business. So it's a sales and marketing led business. And when I first joined there, the Lion brands weren't that strong. And most of them were regional brands. So there'd be state-based brands and there wasn't a lot of national brands. And we were competing against CUB that had some very strong national brands. So there was a very big push on developing our regional brands nationally. And one of the big ones would be Forex Gold. I mean, Forex Gold ended up being the number 1 beer in Australia. And we did a lot of work in all of the other states. We used to start it in the country and then bring it into the city. And we did it slowly over time with the right level of investment and used to have the biggest brand investment. And we had a really good brand manager working on it, Andrew Coates at the time. He had some fantastic campaigns. He got very closely aligned with the sales team. And so the activation and the execution was quite seamless. And I always knew when I was working at CCA, we used to have a lot of angst against the Coke company about the brands. And there was a lot of friction there. And there's been lots of articles written about that saying, it's healthy friction. But it sometimes did distract and take a lot of hours out of the day that you didn't need to do. Whereas when it came to Lion, I thought we can work really closely with the marketing team. And so doing that was fantastic. And then the other time was we always wanted to get market leadership and we hadn't had market leadership, share leadership for a long time. And we managed to get there on the back of when we picked up the Corona distribution. And that was a phenomenal pickup for us. And we had that for 4 years. And I must say CUB had been doing a very good job with it for the 20 years before that. And we were lucky enough to win that distribution. But I mean, that delivered something like $750 million in margin over a 4-year period. Wow. So it was, good margins on beer.
Absolutely enormous. I'm sure I read last week that, I'm not sure it's Forex or Forex Gold, is still one of the fastest growing liquor brands in Australia last year.
It's probably Great Northern now was the one.
I think Great Northern was on the list as well, but Forex was definitely on there.
Yeah. It might be coming back now. It took a bit of a hit. Great Northern did a very good job up in in Queensland and then right through Australia. And I think now they've reinvested back into Forex Gold, and I'm sort of 3 parts removed from it now. But I still love the brand, and it's still I've got that and Tui's new in the fridge, and that's it.
Yeah. Well, it's Forex Gold is mid-strength, so it's probably on trend, isn't it?
Exactly.
So,
very much so.
Yeah, good. So your current business, Inghams, you joined in 2021 to work with Andrew Reeves, who's the CEO. You worked for Andrew at CCA and Lion. So is it Andrew's leadership that kind of brings you from one business to the next? Is that coincidental? Talk us through that journey.
I mean, I've worked with Andrew a long time. Obviously at CCA, I really admired him at CCA, and then he moved across to Lion with Jeremy. And that was a big reason why I went across there as well. And then during that time, Andrew was instrumental in getting the brands up and running. He's a very, very good marketeer, and he sort of set Lion in the right direction. And I stayed on, and he moved to other roles. I then got a very good leader in James Brindley, who I spent a lot of time reporting to. I probably spent 16 of my 17 years there. And again, I think it goes down to, fantastic leaders. You stay in businesses if you've got really good leaders that you're working with. And that's what I really love doing, and all the challenges we had there. But then across, when I finished up at Lion, then Andrew reached out to me with the role that was in Inghams. I was going to have a year off because I sort of really hadn't had that much time off since I'd sort of started working, other than that trip I had. Yeah, the backpacking.
A while ago now.
That's right, which was a long time ago. And so I thought I'd have some time off and get my golf handicap down. And then Andrew had reached out to Inghams, and he'd just come off the board to go into the CEO role, which he'd done for 3 or 4 months, and sat down, had a few coffees with him, and he explained his vision for the business. And I thought, well, I'll give this a try. It's a very different business than the branded long life packaged good ones that I was used to.
It will be. It's a business most people know the name. Everyone knows the name, but it's been around 100 years or so. And we talked right at the start of the pod about the changes it's gone through ownership. It's gone from being a family business to being private equity owned, and I think TPG had it, then listed it in 2016. Just give us an idea of where Inghams is at today.
Yeah, it's very much a supply-led business in the commodity market. So we do have about sort of 7%, 8% of our sales is in the Inghams brand.
Right.
And that's mainly in our freezer and food service space, which is freezable. And most of that is all our crumb product. And that's still big though, because that's like sort of $220 million worth is in that space, because we turn over about $2.5 billion. So it's a big business.
Yeah.
It's a big business. I mean, we've got 4 million chickens. They say it's the white wall of chicken coming at you every week. And it's a whole different business because of the farming, the supply chain, and the farming and the variability you get from farming as well that comes all the way down. So, it takes some time to learn that as well. And, but it's been one of those great changes where I've had to go and spend a lot more time in understanding the supply chain. And we spend a lot more time shaping demand to try and meet the supply of the type of supply that's coming through. So you can have heavy birds, light birds. You can have too much of this, too less of that. And you've just got to shape it all. So we spend a lot of time doing that with customers. And as I said, a lot of it is we're like joint suppliers with a lot of customers. We might do 30 or 40 or 50% of their business, but there'll be another 2 suppliers doing exactly the same thing, but it's identical product that everyone's supplying there. So you've got to differentiate yourself on your service levels. That's one of the most important things in the fresh category is make sure you're on shelf and make sure you've got the service levels right. And so that's something that takes up a lot of focus. And also in commodity, you want to be very cost competitive as well. So there's a lot of work done in our business in continuous improvement and other areas and automation to take costs out of the business.
We talked before about commercial complexity. Having worked with a number of agri FMCGs, the commercial complexity is really dialed up. Yeah, it's an all of business perspective, which never is always changing because it's nature as well.
Yeah,
in farming.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a lot of input costs that are outside your control, like grain and the feed and all of those, and you've just got times when the roosters are doing their job and times when they're not doing their job, and the hatch rate and all these sorts of things that come through. So you've got to keep. Someone explained the industry as it's like a rattlesnake in a box, and once you take your eye off it, it'll bite you. So you've got to stay really close, and it's something where you just do lots of small moves to make sure you get it all lined up the right way.
Yeah. So your role is Chief Customer Officer, which is becoming a slightly more common title, but what is it from your perspective that's different to that role, for instance, to a sales director?
Yep. Well, in this one, I actually have marketing underneath me as well, which I didn't have in the sales director role there. So it includes that part of it. Prior to having marketing come under me, which was a year or so ago, it was quite similar to what a sales director role was. And I do know I was part of a group that were chief customer officers that we used to meet each quarter. It can mean different things to different businesses, and the big difference is whether it's B2B or B2C. And so I think chief customer officers in B2C play a lot bigger role on the consumer part of it. With mine, though, it's really the B2B customer engagement that we have, and then the marketing side of it's been a nice addition for me to have after all these years of being in sales and bagging marketeers all the way through. Now it's like, well, I have to now deliver on the marketing budget. So what do they say? The shoes on the other foot or whatever. So
poacher turn gamekeeper or something.
Yeah,
but,
exactly.
Yeah, and. Looking therefore the role the chief customer officer plays in the journey Inghams is on is interesting. So, what does that journey look like, Mark? Bring that to life, because it is this large, complex business we described, agri FMCG, supply chain complexity. There's many components to it, but ownership changes over the last few years. What does the future look like for Inghams?
Yeah, look, the future looks really good for Inghams. We've got some great tailwinds in the whole industry because poultry is the most affordable protein. It's exceptionally versatile. I was amazed when I got there how much chicken we eat per capita. It's something like 52 kilos per capita per year. So it's nearly a kilo a week
per person. Wow.
Yeah. So it's amazing if you think of all those Marley spoons and HelloFresh and all the rest of it. You look at those menus, so much of it is chicken there. So it's got some really exciting sort of tailwinds coming through. We've got some real opportunities in automation, and we've probably got some great opportunities in new product development as well, because when I first got there was a bit of a saying around the land of bland around some of the chicken offerings, because they've been pretty similar for quite a while. And I must say over the last few years there's been a lot more value enhanced being offered to the category as well. And then there's been a lot more we're looking at the good, better, best level of products, and we're starting to move up that good, better, best area into the free range and other functional benefits that you can get from growing the chickens. So organic and whatnot.
Purely a question as a consumer, as a shopper. It seems to me there's more chicken thighs than there is chicken breasts being sold now.
It's amazing. And that's a change in our demographic. With all of the immigration that we've had, prior to that, Australians were very much white meat is the breast meat. That's what it's referred to. And they would eat breast meat. That was it. And thigh was not really that popular. But now thigh is the most popular cut we have of the bird. Yeah.
I'm right.
If we could produce a chicken with 4 thighs and 2 breasts, it would be perfect for us, because that would meet the demand that's out there for it at the moment.
Yeah.
And I must say, even when I cook it, it's a really easy cook, because it's got a bit of the fat in there as well. So you really can't stuff it up.
You can easily stuff up breast.
You can stuff up breast, exactly. Yeah. You got to be like a Hawkeye on that. It's like we have a turkey business. Turkey is the greatest protein of all the poultry foods there, but it's hard to cook.
Yeah.
And people can stuff that up easily, but thigh, definitely not. And thigh is very tasty.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Oh, a slight deviation for our listeners there, but turn it a cooking show.
Yes, exactly.
Back to you. What sort of leader are you? Just give me an idea of, and this sounds like an interview question. It's not intended to be, but top 3 strengths. What do you kind of bring as a leader?
I always look, if people describe me, that sounds very engaging and energetic as well. But I'm also I remember when I first went into a leadership role, and my boss, Jeremy Lowe, saying to me, what you've done in the previous role is not going to put you in good stead for the next role. And one of those things was, he said, you're going to make a lot less decisions in your new role, your new senior role, but they'll have more impact. And so I've always been really mindful of that, of my team, always getting them to not come to me for the answer, but for them to work out the answer themselves. And if they want to, that we can they can bounce it off me, but I always want them to have the ownership in the answer. And there will be certain times when I'll say, right, this will be a captain's call. I need to do that there. So, and the other bit too for me is just really making sure that my team and the team have got the right resources and capability. One of the things I introduced when I came to Inghams was they didn't do any capability builds at all. And we used to do a lot of that at Lion, and I could see the difference that made, and the confidence that would give people. So, within the team. So we've set up a capability program within Inghams, and I very much promote that and get people involved in that, and play a role in doing that capability build as well. And then the other bit too for me is the Inghams is very much on a culture journey, and I've seen that culture journey work really well in Lion. And Inghams obviously not as mature as where Lion is, but that's another element of my role to make sure that we're developing that right culture. And also, it was quite a siloed business over the years, and especially under private ownership with the Inghams, and the functions didn't really work. They'd just throw things over the fence and you sort this out or you sort that out. And it was quite red and green behaviours. So, can be passive aggressive in certain areas. And so the business has been on a journey. It was on that journey for 3 or 4 years before I got there. But as a leader too, I really want to make sure we're demonstrating those right behaviours within the business, because I know what the benefits are if you get a good collaborative and constructive culture. We'll do a lot better. And I can already see we get our human synergistics that measure the results. The LIs and the LSIs, you can already see that movement happening within our business. It'll take a long time because we've got 8,000 people in the business. So you have to start at the top and sort of work your way through. And we're now getting down to the plant manager sort of level. But you can see it'll take time. But you have to be involved. You have to be leading it all the time.
Bit more green and yellow.
Yeah. A lot more blue.
Oh, blue. Yeah. Good. It sounds fascinating that say it right at the start, complex business, lots to do. Cultural shift is not easy, Mark. But so you've got lots ahead of you and still with Inghams. But if you kind of look more at your career and say, hey, there's other stuff I still want to do. When you kind of jump forward, other experiences or sectors or organizations, you think, I'd love to kind of do that one day. Anything still there and it's still a scratch? Yeah, look,
I'd love to do. I've done the sales director and chief customer role for a long time. I'd like to down the track if the right CEO role came up or MD role came up. I'd like to try myself at that, because you're ultimately responsible for the whole lot. The Inghams one is a very difficult one. Being a listed company, it's been interesting seeing that versus being a non-listed company like Lion. There's a lot of challenges that come with that, and it's a skill set that a CEO has to have within there. So I think there would be that area as well. It's been great moving out of branded package and into something really different. And sort of that's given me a bit of curiosity and interest now to go, well, what could another step look like further down? And what sort of area would I like to get myself into? I always love the FMCG sort of space as well. And when I did have that time off, I did spend a bit of time going, would I set my own business up? Should I go out and do a startup? And look, I was exploring all those different things when I did get the tap on the shoulder. So I didn't sort of finish that exploration either. So who knows, that might be down the track.
Yeah, watch this space. Lots of things to potentially do. Love it. Great. So if you could go back in time and talk to the younger Mark Powell and whether at PwC or CCA and with experience you now have, and could say, hey, this is some advice I'd give you, what would you say?
If I look back, I would say probably chance your arm a bit more. And I sort of didn't really have the career path. It sort of just, and I know a lot of people experience this as well, it sort of just kept progressing as I was going along. And so I sort of let that progress as it was going along. But I was really enjoying it and getting a lot out of it. You know what they say, like, you got to love more about your job than you don't like about your job. And that keeps you into that job. But I think if maybe if I had tried some different functional areas early as well, because I did do the sales role for a long time. But I did really enjoy that as well. So it's a real trade-off. I did plenty of education along the way. Sort of became a chartered accountant, then did an MBA as well, then did the Institute of Company Directors course and those sort of things. So I did enjoy doing that, and I'd always encourage people to do those sort of things. And then the other one too is I probably didn't work my networks outside of line as much as I could have. And I think, when you do look for different roles, whether it's people like yourself or other people in different businesses as well, it's just looking at that network to have a look to see what other opportunities are out there as well, and keep your eyes open to those things. So, that's what I'd probably do. I'd probably have, I always thought it was a little bit disloyal to do that. And that was just my upbringing. And I did used to get some calls when I was at Lion, and I'd say, no, I wouldn't do that because I really like the boss I'm working for and I like the role I'm in and where we're heading to. So I was always like that. But then the other time you sort of go, for your own development, is it, should you maybe keep an eye out there and have a look? And so I would encourage people always to do that.
Yeah, good advice. I think the loyalty piece is always a challenge for a lot of people. And as we say to anybody, hey, look, having a conversation doesn't mean you're leaving a business.
Yeah.
It just means that you're keeping yourself honest and making good decisions that your pathway is the right one.
Yes. Yeah. And I think the other thing too for people is to go, you can move into different roles and different companies, and then you can always go back if you like those things. But I think movement to even just the change from Lion across into Inghams has been like, wow, you've really had to stop and start learning again, which I think is just good for anyone in their careers.
Talking of kind of those moves and when they happen, we actually do often push people back to the businesses. They approach us, because they've had a bad day or a bad week or a bad meeting, and you're like, no, you're not ready to move. Yeah. There's things you've got to do. It's the wrong time for you. And it's always surprising when we say that, but I think making a move for the wrong reasons is a wrong move generally. How do you know it's right when things have happened in your career, or you're giving advice to others? When do you know it's the right time to kind of actually make an external move to the organization you're in?
I mean, with team members I've had reporting to me and some people I've mentored as well, I've always said at the end of every year, just have a look to see what you've done to build on your CV. And if you haven't done anything, that's probably a time for you to move and go and do something else. Because at the end of the day, that's the true test. It's like, what skill set or experience have I had that I can build that's going to help me get to the next role as well. And I think the other bit too is just knowing where you want to get to and what that steps might be in advance. So it might be you've got to do this role for 3 years or 4 years. And I remember working with the Advantage Group early on and John McLaughlin, and we were talking about national business managers and account teams. And I said to him, he obviously does the Advantage Group survey. And I said, how much time do you think people need to stay into these sort of roles? And he said 2 years is too short. And 3 years is better. 4 years might be, but then 4 years might be too long. So there's sort of moving. So there's a nice sweet spot that's in there, and that's what you've got to be mindful of. Because I think if I see a CV that someone's moved every 1 year or 2 years, it's alarm bells to start with.
Agreed. It is. John's a previous guest in the pod, but I love your way of summing that up. If you take a look back every year and think, have I built something on what I've done? And if you're starting to repeat and you're not adding, then it's time.
Yes.
Yeah. Really simple way to look at it, but I like that lens. I'm going to ask one final question. This is the one that will come back to not haunt you, but be replayed back to you again and again, because it's about recruitment. So what impresses you in a candidate when they're going through a recruitment process?
For me, I really look for someone that, to start with, is really engaging. You can tell from the interview and their preparation how committed they are to the role and how well they've prepared for it as well. There's also a humility aspect of things. So I think it can be tricky in an interview because you really want to talk yourself up, but you've got to do it in the right way. And you can't be overly positive about everything you've done. You've got to sort of do that in the right way. And then the other bit too is, you've got to be curious. And I'm really surprised sometimes in interviews when I say to people, have you got a question? And they've got no question at all.
It's the worst, isn't it?
It's the worst. And you sort of go, I mean, we get it when we do our town halls. And I've stopped asking the team and the broader team if you've got a question. But I'm always surprised at that because I think if you really want this role and you're really thinking about and you really want to join the company, you must have a lot of questions that you'd want to ask. And even if you might have asked them in other interviews with other people, I think that's a demonstration of where you're at. So, they're the sort of the key bits. And then, of course, with all of these, you're getting a couple other people to meet with them as well. You get a good feel for the candidates because you've got to get the right cultural fit, and it's important. But you also want, at the same time, a bit of diversity in your team as well. So you don't want everyone to look and feel and sound the same.
Yeah. I agree with everything you say there. Some absolute gems we've covered today. I think. Guys, those listening, re-listen to this again. There's so many pearls of wisdom, which I think you can take away. Mark, loved it. Really enjoyed the conversation. Regular listeners and those in the AXR ecosystem will be very aware of all the assets we produce to bring career pathways to life, to equip you guys to make great career decisions. I'm going to finish today by promoting just one of our monthly reports. What's the question we get asked most as recruiters? It's how's the market? So that's what we've actually called our monthly blog, which answers that very question, a short and snappy overview of the sales, marketing and category recruitment market through the eyes and the ears of our business. So if you're ever wondering how is the market, make sure you connect to the XR team and sign up to the blog. So Mark, once again, thanks. That was awesome.
Thanks for having me.
And for me, Mike Dixon, I look forward to the next pod where we'll help you get the most out of your future in sales and marketing.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast from AXR Recruitment and Search. We're passionate about helping you get the most out of your sales and marketing career. Keep listening as we bring you more career insights and advice from Australia's inspiring sales and marketing leaders. See you next time on Your Future in Sales and Marketing.